Welcome back. Today we're talking about Amazon stock. If we look at a stock chart on year to date for Amazon, in February, early February, they hit a high of $242.52. And then since then, obviously the whole market kind of went into a bear market, and it hasn't been a good last couple months in the stock market. A lot of things have crashed down, including Amazon, and then they hit a low of around 167.32. So in the last 5 days, around last 5 trading days, the stock has started to bounce back off of those low levels, and now we're currently trading at 187.57 today. Just today, it's a relatively flat day. And yeah, on a year chart, it's relatively flat. It's about 4%, 4.5% on a 1 year. They also report earnings on May 1st, so that is coming up in the next couple days. We're entering earnings season here. And today, I just want to talk about Amazon, what they do. And guys, they do a lot. It is a massive company, so I want to talk about what is important for the stock and if I would add this stock into my own personal portfolio. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. My name's Sheldon. This is my portfolio. I have around $77,800 invested in the stock market. These are all the positions I own. You can see the rate of return that I have in my portfolio. And guys, I am not claiming to be some type of expert Wall Street financial analyst. I'm just some guy that's been investing in the market for over 5 years, and I like to share what I've learned along the way. So subscribe to the channel if you are interested in the markets, and let's all build and grow our portfolios together. So let's get right into it. There is a lot to cover when it comes to Amazon, and let's start with just a decent overview here. On a year-to-date chart, they're down about 15%. On a 1 year, 4.5, 5 years, they're at about a 62% gain in the last 5 years. You can see the recent pullback has been a pretty big pullback. They are roughly a $2 trillion market cap company. And this is one thing about Amazon that is absolutely... This is crazy. I'm not going to lie. They have $637 billion of trailing 12-month revenue. And if you guys have looked and analyzed a lot of stocks before, you know that that is an insane number. Okay, I don't think any of the other like FANG and Meg 7 stocks, like the closest stock, like for example, to compare it to would be like Apple. And Apple only has like a $400 billion trailing 12-month revenue. So Amazon makes a lot of money, okay? And we'll dive into like how that revenue is broken up and what they do to make all that money. But just the first thing to realize is they make a lot of money. Like that is not common to have a stock with revenue that is close to over 600 billion. Of that 600 billion, the net income is roughly 60 billion. They have a positive, obviously, $5.50 earnings per share, a 33.9 PE ratio, and a forward PE ratio that is projected to go down. So the first thing that I kind of want to dive into here is the different segments of the revenue and the different products and services that they have, because I mean, obviously, a lot of people watching this know what they do, but to dive just a little bit further into it, we can see that they have retail sales. They offer consumer products through online and physical stores. They also have a third-party seller service, which is the majority, like probably what you know Amazon as. Like you go on Amazon.com or .ca and you order a product. That product is probably sold through some type of other seller that is using the third-party selling service on Amazon. And it enables sellers to sell their products in our stores or fulfill orders with our services. So it's like Amazon FBA and just like typically what you think of Amazon, that's what those first two retail sales and third-party seller services are. They also have advertising services. And like they have sponsored ads on their platforms and in their subscription services. Subscription services itself is a product and service, obviously, that they have, like Amazon Prime, which is digital video, audiobooks, digital music. They have Prime Music, I think it's called, ebooks, AWS, which is a very large segment and one that we're going to dive in a little bit further into in this video. But obviously, they have AWS, which is their cloud infrastructure, deployments and that side of the business. And then they have other, which will also touch on a couple other things that I think would probably fall into this category, but it also says like healthcare services. I had no idea that Amazon offered any type of healthcare service or whatever. But they also have some smaller, like, other bets is what you'd see it on maybe other companies, in other company earning reports. So to just talk about AWS first, because AWS is the biggest cloud service provider out there, right? Like, if we just look here, this is a chart of the market share when it comes to the global cloud market. AWS is far in front with 30% market share. That is it's a crazy market, right? Like, it's a very large market that lots of enterprises and lots of consumers use, and to have 30% of that market, that is a huge accomplishment and definitely not easy to do, especially considering that, like, Microsoft and Google aren't even, like, I guess Azure is 2/3 of it, obviously, but Google Cloud isn't even like halfway. Doesn't even have half the market share that AWS does. And from the surface level, thinking about it, I would think that Google has like almost, more market share than Amazon, because Google is Google. Like, I don't know. I just kind of think about Google as the cloud platform. But AWS is way out in front with lots more market share than the biggest players. Oracle, Salesforce, IBM Cloud, like they ain't even close to AWS. So just that is a really solid thing to know as an investor and as a shareholder doing research on the stock. Their cloud segment is far out in front of a lot of the other competitors in the market. They also have, scroll up here, one thing that they recently started doing, like in the last couple years here, and I believe it's called Kuiper. Amazon launches first Kuiper internet satellites in bid to take on Elon Musk's Starlink. So it's basically they are launching a low orbit constellation to provide broadband and internet connectivity to rural areas and people that don't have the greatest internet, right? Like, it's pretty much a direct competitor to something like a Starlink. And so they recently, I think they like just launched their first satellite, or they've launched their first 27 Kuiper satellites. And if I'm saying that wrong, I don't really know how to say it. Okay, so just you got to deal with it. But their first 27 satellites, and it's the direct competitor to Starlink. And Starlink has around 8,000 satellites in orbit. At least this article says. I'm pretty sure it's like a little bit less than that, actually. But I believe like the first initial goal of this, it was a $10 billion investment from Amazon. And I think the initial goal, at least in the first like phase with their first initial investment of 10 billion, is to get 3,000 satellites in there. So you can kind of get an idea of how big Starlink is. And competing with Starlink, I think, is going to be a challenge. But Amazon, they got to the point as a company where they were like, why not let's start launching satellites and rockets into the sky, because, they kind of have enough money and the resources to be able to provide a service like that. So, like, honestly, why not step into that world? So that's one thing that they started doing, and something that's interesting to look at as an investor. They also do manufacture their own chips. AWS Trainium is, they're technically semiconductors, and there are chips that are built for performance and deep learning and generative AI training, while lowering costs. So I'm not sure if, like, you can go and buy your own semiconductors from Amazon, or if they just build their own in-house and then provide the services through AWS to use their own chips. I'm not totally sure about that, to be honest. But, like, for example, AWS Elastic Cloud is like, EC2 is their classic like virtual machine instance that you would run if you just want basic level compute in AWS. That's like one of their probably their most popular services that they provide through AWS. And so now they have this thing called EC2 Train 2 instance, which we can look at that here. And so this is like, if you wanted to build your own model and train your own generative AI and kind of get into that inferencing world, you could launch something like an EC2 Train 2 instance that uses their own chips, and you can start to build your own model, start to build your own AI. I believe you could do like text to speech, text to text, image generation, just pretty much any type of AI model that you can think of. You can start to train on AWS and with their own Trainium chip. So they do have like their satellite world, semiconductor world, retail world, advertising world, video production world. It's just the amount of things that Amazon does now is crazy. And obviously they have like 650 almost $1 billion in revenue. So they definitely do a lot. So that's kind of a broad overview of a lot of the different buckets that Amazon, has money in, and a lot of the different products and services that they provide. Obviously they have like classic Amazon. You go online, you order a product, it gets delivered to you. And one thing just that I want to touch on here, because I think it makes Amazon unique, and you hear somebody like a Warren Buffett talk about this a lot in terms of making investments, but it's a company's moat. And a moat basically just means their competitive advantage. What separates them from the competition in terms of like keeping their business safe and having barriers to entry into becoming a competitor for that business. And for Amazon, like the amount of product selection that they have on their website is crazy, right? Like I don't have any specific numbers or specific statistics about it, but it's got to be one of the biggest product selection catalogs in the entire world. And then you pair that with a distribution ecosystem that they've built out over the last 10, 15, 20 years, where they have fulfillment centers and distribution centers across North America and even globally. That, in my opinion, that is a massive moat, right? Like that is trying to compete with that keeps the business safe. That's something that I think is a good thing to keep in mind when you're buying into a stock like Amazon. Like that is one of their competitive advantages, and it's something you hear Warren Buffett talk about. It's important to try to analyze what the competitive advantage is and what the moat is for that business. And that's just one thing that I think it would be for Amazon. So with that being said, let's start to get into some of their numbers from their last quarterly earnings. So they did report fourth quarter 2024 in February, and they had net sales, which increased 10% to $187 billion, from compared to fourth quarter in 2023 of $170 billion. And I guess one thing to quickly note about a company like Amazon, like if you look at their financials and then you look at revenue on a quarterly basis, their Q4, just like something like a Meta and honestly a lot of other companies, like their Q4 is going to be a standout quarter in the rest of, compared to all the other quarters in that business. Like $187 billion in Q4 2024, right? That came from Q3 being like 160, and then Q2 is like 150. And then like Q4 2023 is bigger than all the other quarters from behind in that year, right? Like it's bigger than Q3, Q1, Q2, Q1 in 2023. And it's just like, that's just a general trend for a lot of businesses, is Q4 is a standout quarter. So even though like in their guidance where they project for Q1, it's lower than the quarter that they just had, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? So to go back, Amazon typically breaks their business up into a North American segment, international segment, and AWS segment. So if you're just looking at any of their quarterly earnings reports or their 10K or 10Qs or whatever, that's probably how you're going to see some of their revenue broken down. In the North American segments for Q4 2024 was $115.6 billion, international was $43.4 billion, and AWS increased 19% year over year, which I also think is one of the faster growing clouds as well. I think maybe Google is growing a bit faster. I looked at Google numbers not too long ago. But either way, they're both growing very fast, and it's an incredibly fast growing industry, the cloud infrastructure business. But 19% year over year to $28.8 billion. So those are all very, very solid numbers. And that all came from or net income increased to $20 billion in the fourth quarter. So if we look at their guidance here, this is another reason that there was a little bit of selling pressure on the stock, obviously, from all the tariff news and all that, but also because they guided this quarter and they guided slower growth than I think they ever have before. And that's why I have this little sad face here, because this is what I saw a couple articles about people talking about this, which I don't think is a really... I don't think it's nothing, honestly. Like, I don't view this as a bad thing or a reason to not buy the stock. If not, it's a reason to buy the stock. But let's talk about it. So net sales are expected to be between 151 and 155. So obviously that's lower than Q4 of 2024. But it's still a growth, right? From, if we look at, does it say Q1 2024 from first quarter? So it's still growth of 5 to 9% compared to Q1 2024. So that's where it's lower. The 5 and 9%. I believe typically quarter over quarter growth for Amazon is roughly 10%. Like if we look here, the revenue growth, like it's all 12, 10, 9. I guess there's an 8, 14, and then recently it's been like 10, 11, 12. So to come up with guidance and have it say like between 5 and 9, some people kind of didn't react well, and it just put a bit of selling pressure onto the stock and a bit of negative news around the optics, because that's all guidance and forecasting is. What matters is the numbers that actually come in. So I don't think the fact that they guided for like slower growth than they've pretty much ever historically have is a bad thing. Like, keep in mind, this is a massive, massive company, a $2 trillion market cap business that makes $630 billion of revenue. Like, you can't continue to expect massive growth, right? And I think the fact that they might slow down in the future is just kind of a reality of having a business that's that big. And I understand that if you were to buy into that stock, that's something that you should keep in mind, and a risk factor that you should think about, because you're not going to be getting 30, 40, 50% revenue growth numbers out of Amazon unless something crazy happens and their satellite business just completely takes over Starlink and something crazy happens, right? Like, it's possible, but just keep in mind that, like, it could happen where their sales, the growth in terms of their revenue, starts to go down as the company just continues to be one of the biggest businesses in the world. Operating income is expected to be between 14 and 18 billion compared to 15 billion in first quarter. So that as well, I could see that as maybe being a little bit of a more of a negative catalyst, because it's not their Q4, it's not their standout quarter, and then to have negative revenue growth for year over year for a quarter, that could definitely be a little bit more of a negative catalyst than just projecting slower than expected growth. So operating income is definitely something that I would be paying attention to in their upcoming earnings reports. And definitely their net sales as well. Like, everything they guide for, you should probably take a look. And if you're interested in buying the stock, you should definitely go through and look at this entire document. It's their news release details for Amazon announces their fourth quarter results, so their quarter before the one that they're just about to announce. You should honestly dive through a lot more than just this, like their 10K, all of the news, go through the stock statistics, their balance sheet, cash flow, income statement, all of that. I'm just trying to give a broad overview for people that are interested in the stock. So with all that being said, would I add this position into my portfolio? Because I don't currently own Amazon stock, and I actually have never owned Amazon stock. I don't think ever. But it's always been one that I've found very interesting, and a company that's obviously rock solid. For me, the thing is, I think, like, in terms of their different business segments, right? Like the retail, advertising, subscription, like, I have most of these covered already in my portfolio. Like digital advertising, like I own Meta, right? 98% of Meta's revenue is from digital advertising. So I kind of have that segment covered. AWS, I own GCP, or I own Google, which owns GCP. So it's like kind of already have that segment also covered. For semiconductors, like I have AMD in my portfolio. So like that's my bet when it comes to semiconductors and the hardware level of AI and generative AI training. Like that's where my bet is, right? Like I don't necessarily need more exposure to that through Amazon, but if I was building like a new portfolio, or if I didn't have exposure to a lot of their business segments already in my portfolio, then it's absolutely a stock that I would consider buying, especially today at the levels that it's currently at. Like it's not trading at a crazy expensive forward PE and forward PE, right? Like 33. It's slightly more expensive than market averages, but it's such it's such a beast company. Like, they do so many different things. When you buy into Amazon, it's a diversified business. You know, if their semiconductor business fails, like, they still have all the retail, all of the production, all of their distribution network, and they have a solid competitive advantage in the market. So I do think it's a solid investment. In terms for me and my portfolio, I don't think I will be adding shares of Amazon anytime soon, just because I already have exposure to a lot of the things and the products and services that Amazon offers. That is pretty much the overview that I wanted to give for Amazon stock. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel for more content just like this one. In a few moments, I'll have a SoFi and AMD video pop up on the screen, so you could check those out if you're interested in those companies as well. Thank you so much for watching. I wish you all the best of luck on your investment journey. Peace.